so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. This is your host, Lori LeBay, and I have a frog in my voice once again. It's springtime and allergy season here. I am your host of Alzheimer Speaks and founder as well as the host of Alzheimer Speaks Radio. We're going to have a really interesting show for you today. We have Judy Cornish with us, who has written a book and has a new method in terms of dealing with dementia called the Dawn Method. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But because we get so many listeners, I'm just going to let people know who we are and what we do here at Alzheimer Speaks, because like I said, we always get new listeners, and it's always nice to know who the heck you're listening to. Bottom line, Alzheimer Speaks is an advocacy-based company, and we provide multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. And we just have a blast doing that. We have everything from a website to a blog to the radio platform to something we call Dementia Chats, which is a video interview of experts, and those experts actually are living and diagnosed with the disease. We also do a lot of speaking and training. We're putting on a cruise conference for dementia this fall, so we just try to be innovative and really engaging with all aspects of individuals dealing with this disease. We also believe that joining forces and sharing knowledge is really the only way that we're going to win this battle with dementia. And I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing our information. Your likes, your clicks, your shares, if it's the blog, if it's the radio show, the website, etc., is huge, because there are so many people in our own spheres dealing with dementia that we don't even know. And they don't feel safe in terms of coming out and talking about it yet. But the more information that they can find, the easier it's going to be for them to reach out and grab it. We also feel strongly here on the show that by having these everyday conversations that we're going to be able to not only raise awareness, but we're going to be able to remove some of the stigmas attached to memory loss and hopefully remove a lot of that fear and isolation that goes with it. So thank you for being part of our Alzheimer Speaks family. And we hope that you will continue to raise awareness by sharing the information and the content that we push out. You see, all your likes, your shares, and your clicks got us noted as the #1 influencer online by ShareCare and Dr. Oz. And we were also lucky enough to have Maria Shriver notice us and call us an architect of change. And we don't take that as us. We take that as our community as a whole, because it's all of us working together to make these changes and help raise awareness. So, again, I want to thank you. The last thing I want to tell you about us is here on the show, and if it's the blog or whatever, again, we like to hear everybody's voice. So think about who you are, what you do, and what your thoughts are about dementia, because you might be a great next guest for us. We interview people with dementia. We interview families who are dealing with it, business professionals, authors, researchers, movie directors, singer-songwriters, you name it. Advocates. It takes all of us to really shift our dementia care culture, and we can't shift if we don't talk. And so that's what I love about our program, is this truly is true talk radio. Before I introduce Judy, I just want to make a couple of announcements. One is I really invite all of you to be part of our conference and cruise that we are doing November 11th through the 18th. And we will be leaving Florida for an Eastern Caribbean cruise for 7 days. And we've got just an amazing team that's going to be with us. It'll be myself and Cindy Lazinski from Colorado, who's a professional. Both of us have a lot of experience with dementia-friendly communities and a lot of other things dementia-related. And then we have 4 people on our team who are actually living and diagnosed with the disease: Harry Urban, Michael Ellenbogen, Lori Shearer, and Mary Reed. And then we just found out Becky Watson, who is a music therapist, is going to be joining us. So actually, our plan is going to change, our program plan, and I haven't updated that, but you can go to alzheimerspeaks.com and see what we have so far, knowing that there will be even more coming with that program. People are always asking me, roughly what does it cost? And part of it's going to depend on what type of cabin that you choose to book, and that can be anywhere from $1,400 to $1,800, and then you'd still have your airfare and stuff to in transportation to get back and forth. But once you're on the ship, that's your meals and your rooms, and also includes the conference. And you do have to go through Kathy Schoaf in order to be part of the conference. So again, you can just go to alzheimerspeaks.com. You can download a flyer, you can get more program information, or you can get directed straight to Kathy, and she can help you out with much more detail there. So let's go and introduce our guest today. I'm very excited to have Judy Cornish with us. She is an elder law attorney, an author, and the founder of Dementia and Alzheimer's Wellbeing Network, or what's referred to as DAWN. And she is also the creator of the DAWN method of dementia care. Judy believes that if we look at dementia more as a psychological condition rather than a disease, and a simple pattern of abilities and cognitive losses appear to make dementia easier to deal with. And it's a happier, more joyful process for everyone. So welcome to the show today, Judy.
Oh, thank you, Lori. It's wonderful to join you. Thank you.
Well, good. One of the questions I always ask everybody before we kind of go down our path is, do you have a personal connection to dementia? Do you have family or friend who have been diagnosed in your own circle?
The way I became involved was through a neighbor. I don't have anybody in my family, but, of course, the older I get, the more people who are my friends are actually developing it. But for me, it came from a neighbor, this lovely woman across the street who would have had to move into a care facility if she didn't have someone who could help her just deal with the daily life when she had memory loss and increasing confusion.
Okay.
So it really was a neighbor who became a dear friend through whom I got involved with dementia care.
Okay. Well, great. It's always just nice to know for our listeners, if there's a family or personal connection there. Typically for anybody who's involved with this, it is quite personal. Once they become an advocate, you can just hear they were touched. And for you, it was that neighbor, that made that connection and drew you into the world of dementia. Why don't we talk about your dementia handbook and why you decided to write it and how you think that it can help people dealing with dementia?
For me, I think actually I wrote the book for 2 reasons. And the first one was because as an attorney, when I was practicing elder law, I saw so many families that would be bankrupted by the cost of long-term care.
Mm-hmm.
And, it affects so many of us. It really is an epidemic. And so, as an attorney, I'd be settling in an estate and probating an estate and see an entire inheritance that would have gone to the next generation and helped them, pay off mortgages or send their children to college, and you'd see the entire inheritance go into long-term care.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, the beginning of my awareness of just how widespread dementia and Alzheimer's really was in the United States. And then secondly, when I did get to know, that first neighbor, and what had happened was I had moved to Moscow, Idaho, thinking that I would semi-retire from the law and just practice law just a few hours a week or a few hours a month. And so her daughter came across the street and said, that they were going to have to move Mom because she kept losing the car. And I said, don't make her move. I'm not working.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be happy to check in on her, and I can take her to get groceries, and and if she loses the car, I can find it. And so that started just with not me wanting to help this one person, and within a couple of weeks I was helping another neighbor, and then within 2 months I realized I'd essentially started a business that was focused on providing dementia care rather than senior care.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the past 6.5 years, my goal has always been to help people who are experiencing dementia be able to retain dignity and autonomy, and as much as possible help people to stay in their own homes. And so writing this book, and it's a very small book. It's only about 100 pages, but what I wanted to do was be able to explain for all of us, for families, not in medical terms or in using this more than when diagnosis or anything else. I wanted just to make it really clear to us as families and friends, how can we make life better for our loved ones when they experience dementia?
Okay.
And so, it was my hope that I could communicate this pattern I saw.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's nice. That's kind of my philosophy too, is do stuff that's practical and kind of break away from the medical academic model, because it doesn't translate in the streets to the families who are struggling with this disease, and for the people who are diagnosed that are struggling for answers. They just want to have a conversation. They want to use everyday language that makes sense to them so that they can then apply it. And when we use all this wonderful medical jargon, it just kind of pulls this fog over them and says, oh, this is too deep. I can't. It's too much work. And when you can get to the simplicity of just teaching people how to live graciously with it and the little tips and tricks that you've learned, those are amazing, gifts and outcomes to be able to share with people. Those are really life-changing events, in that matter.
And I think we're a little sidetracked. Here in the United States, we're really good at treating disease and responding to disease. And we have this focus, and dementia is it's a medical condition. But when we focus on testing for the presence and then diagnosing and then treating, and we don't have effective treatments, we can't at this point cure somebody. I think we become preoccupied with that medical analysis and diagnosis and process. And when we do that, we end up really focused on the disease rather than on the person.
Yeah.
And treatment, you really do want your doctor or your surgeon, your medical professional, you do want them focused on the disease. Mm-hmm. If it's cancer, I want my surgeon very focused on my cancer, not on me. Mm-hmm. But for these things that we cannot cure, these conditions that we're going to have to live with, I think it's really important that we see the difference between treatment and care, and that we when we're looking at something we can't cure, that we're thinking about quality of life and we're focused on the individual. And when we do that, then I think it's easier for us to see what the person really can do.
Yep. Well, and I think that's a great analogy, because we don't have a cure. We don't even know what causes it yet. There's lots of different theories with that. And so let's focus on what we do know. We do know that we still want to live life. We still want to engage. So how do we do that? How do we still belong to society and not become outcasts, not become isolated and
marginalized?
Yeah. And that's huge, because everybody wants to fit in. And yet, for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to be a high priority in terms of the educational process and the funding process during this interim when we don't have a cure. And, personally, I would like to see that change. And I know it has over the last 5 years, but it still isn't even close to sufficient in my eyes anyways, in terms of what it is we need, and to have these everyday conversations with everyday people, and, turning and asking people living with the disease, what do you think? Because
Right.
they have opinions and they have ideas,
Yes.
and
Yes,
and
they
we
do.
and we need to take those seriously, because they know better than any of us what it's like to live with this disease.
Yeah, that's right. I loved hearing you say that you're guided by the experts,
Mm-hmm.
because that's exactly how I feel. I mean, in writing this book, I think I actually say it in the first paragraph. I feel more like a scribe.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I've learned about dementia, I learned it first from my clients,
Mm-hmm.
from these people that I began working with here. And, and then secondly, I started reading and trying to learn everything I could about it. But boy, the experts are the people who have it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I developed dementia, the dementia does not make me any less of who I am. I am still myself, and I am still a fully intelligent, mature person. It's just that I have my skill sets have been altered,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to have to interact with a different set of skills. And so if we can just recognize that as families, as caregivers, as citizens, that when somebody develops dementia, they don't become less of a person. They only have to use a more limited set of skills.
Well, and
I think then we can be good caregivers.
Well, and I like that. And if we look at our lives realistically, every single one of us, our skill sets are constantly changing. And so
Right.
life is about adapting. And one of the things that I hear from people with dementia all the time is, they'll say, well, I'm doing good because I'm able to adapt. And when the disease gets really tough is when they're running out of options to adapt. It's getting too difficult to adapt to the disease. And the disease is starting to really take more of them. And I'll use their words, more of them away. Kind of nibbling away at them. But, that's when we have to, during this whole process, we have to learn to consciously care. We have to realize that we have more alike than different, and that all of us are adapting all the time. And it's not about necessarily, and I think it's viewed this way, that everyone else around them is adapting to them. And yet, when you look at adapting, a lot of times it's just adjustments that they need to be able to do things. And it doesn't have to be where everyone else's world stops. But I think that perception is out there that if you're caring for somebody, your world is going to stop and it's going to kind of be taken over. And you can walk this journey hand in hand. And anytime you care for somebody, you're willingly giving part of your time and your energy and your support to somebody else, but never are you not getting something in return. And
that is so true.
And I think that that's a premise out there, that people think I'm not getting anything back. And the only time that that's going to happen is if you let the disease take your relationship away. And you're the only one that can protect that. And so if we're conscious of that, that makes a huge, huge difference in our approach. And that's one of the things that I really like about your handbook, is you have some really simple, nice techniques for people to be able to utilize right away and go, oh, I could apply that. I could do that today. Right. I don't have to think. I don't have to study. I don't have to practice. I can just try it.
That's right. Because all we need is, really, we as caregivers and we as family, we just need to understand what they can do and what they can't do.
Mm-hmm.
What skills are retained and what skills are lost. And when you're looking at dementia as a condition that affects how you interact with the world around you and with the people in the world around you, then the pattern is really simple. It's much simpler than looking at dementia as a medical condition.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we look at dementia medically, we have to think about what type of dementia is it? What disease has caused it, and what area of the brain is being impacted, and And then, of course, because we're talking about somebody's brain and their cognition, then we also have to take into account what their personality is, because a different personality is going to be affected differently. And then, in addition, you've got to think about what that person's earlier life experiences were. And so now you've got all these variables, and it's really difficult to understand or interpret what do they mean when language begins to be impacted and more difficult to understand, and communication is becoming more and more limited. And so from a medical point of view, it gets very difficult to look at and respond to functionally. But when we look at dementia as, and maybe this is because my background is in the arts, not in science, but what I saw was that people really, and the first pattern that stood out to me was this intuitive thought, rational thought, that I would see my clients, and it didn't matter whether the person I was talking to or working with had been a professor or a scientist here at one of our local universities, or whether they were a housewife or an artist or a musician. It didn't matter. Each of them was losing rational thought skills and not losing intuitive thought. And once I saw that, then it became so much simpler to spend time together and to help them continue to enjoy daily life. Because what I started doing was just taking care of all the rational thought functions. And then I would be looking for ways that I could enrich their lives with things that they could interpret with their intuitive thought.
Can you give an example of rational versus intuitive thought? I think that might help our audience a little bit.
Yeah. So if I'm at home and I hear a loud sound, I'm going to jump. I'm working at the computer, I'm reading a book, deep in thought. You hear a loud sound and you jump. So right away, that was intuitive thought. That was your brain responding to a stimuli from the environment. At the same moment, my rational brain starts cataloging all the things that could have made that loud sound. So within nanoseconds, I have realized that it was the door slamming. And my memory is telling me that sound sounded just like a door being slammed by the breeze. So the intuitive thought is my instantaneous reaction to stimuli, and then my rational thought is what helps me interpret it. So the same as if you're driving down the road and a dog runs out, and you swerve. You swerve right away. That was your intuitive thought avoiding danger, your fight or flight response. But at the same moment, just within a second or two, you realize you just swerved into oncoming traffic, so you rationally move back out of the oncoming traffic lane. So our intuitive thought is what that thought system that is instantaneous. It responds to danger. It's absorbing, and when you see something beautiful and you have that immediate response of, "Ooh, that's pretty," that was your intuitive thought. When you smell something and it smells really good, you walk into a bakery and you smell the baking. That's intuitive thought that goes, that was delicious. That smells wonderful. Rational thought it's conscious, and it takes effort, and it's methodical, and it's how we analyze and catalog and sort and come up with reasoned responses. So when you walk into the room and you see a picture and you think, oh, that's beautiful, then you could stand there and look at it and you could analyze why you think it's beautiful using rational thought. So we all have these two very different thought systems. And intuitive and rational, that's the terms I use. Plato, Einstein used these terms, intuitive and rational. And in the 1960s, Roger Sperry wrote, he did quite a bit of writing and called it left brain, right brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, that's not really accurate. Our intuitive thought doesn't all occur on the right-hand side of the brain. But it's a really good shorthand, just for becoming more aware of these two very different thought systems that we all have. And that, a big part of being a good companion to somebody who has dementia is understanding that we ourselves have intuitive and rational thought. Mm-hmm. And then we can be more aware of our companions' loss of rational thought. And that way we know how to help them.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the easiest ways for people to, if you're still struggling with understanding the terms, is intuitive thought just comes to you. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to process it. It's
right.
it just shows up and it's there.
Yes, yeah. You don't choose. It just happens.
It just happens. And I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, but I find that intuitive is, it kind of comes with an emotion attached to it.
Yeah.
If it's happy or sad or angry or peaceful, but there's something more to it than just that.
Yeah.
There's like this emotional reaction. And rational thought, I think of is, okay, I have option A, B, or you're trying to connect, okay, A went to B, went to C, and now I'm at D, and I need to get to E, and and it gets complicated, and it slows us down usually.
Exactly.
And and typically rational thought. I think also in our minds we think that there's a right or a wrong, and intuitive just is. It doesn't think about right or wrong. It doesn't think about judgment. It's just there. And
intuitive thought is all the good stuff, because it's intuitive thought that lets me use all of my senses and absorb beauty and listen to music, and like all of Dan Cohen's work with music and memory. People, the Alive Inside film with Henry, that's somebody's intuitive thought being activated.
Yep.
And I was watching his neighbor Phil in the on your website, and I love the place where he says to her, "Do you remember my name?" And her reply is, she pauses and then she says, "I know it by heart."
Yep.
So does she remember his name? No, because that's factual information. And so without rational thought and without memory, she's not going to get to the fact. But she knows what's important. She knows him.
Yep.
And that's her intuitive thought that is still there. See, this is probably the most important thing I could tell families and tell people who love somebody with dementia is, the ability to feel emotions is still there. And the ability to read your emotions and how you're feeling, it's still there. And then the ability to enjoy beauty, it's all there. It's not impacted at all. Let's just fill their lives with as much beauty and sensory stimulation and social contact as possible, because they can still do it. Yep.
Yeah, it's and sometimes we have to look at different ways in terms of how they communicate that stuff to us. We're so used to being tied into words, and words are such a small portion of what we communicate. And I'm trying to think, what I was watching a video or something the other day, and they said, words are like 5% of our communication. And yet we rely on them so heavily instead of all the other pieces, all the other nonverbals, that we give out. And but again, our nonverbals, they're kind of an intuitive thing. And people with dementia will tell us over and over, I'm picking up everything you're saying to me without you saying a word.
Exactly.
They know.
That's right. My clients sure do.
Yeah, they know what mood we're in. They know what we're really thinking, even if we're saying something that's conflicting. They're feeling that, and then that makes them more confused.
That's That's right. And I think this, so I teach my staff and I teach families, in my training classes, that when you're with somebody who has dementia, nonverbal communication becomes more important than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm losing language skills, so I'm losing vocabulary and I'm losing the ability to interpret the meaning of your actual words as you speak to me, then I will be left with only your nonverbal communication to interpret. And nonverbal, reading other people's facial expressions and body language and intonation, that's we start learning all of that when we are infants.
Mm-hmm.
The baby in arms is already learning how to motivate mom and dad to come, and looking at their faces and understanding whether they're happy or not happy, just from facial expression. And that infant does not speak English. So these are very early things that skills that we begin learning, and it's experientially learned. And things that we learn experientially are tied to our intuitive thought, not to rational thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what's happening, that people in dementia, we are retaining the ability to access what we've learned through experience. And I see my clients able to continue to learn through experience, even though they can't sit down and use rational thought to pay attention or to memorize or to recall or to organize or analyze, any of those rational thought functions.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I would agree with that. And I think part of the beauty in this whole process of really learning about the intuitive versus the rational is you come to learn that a lot of our rational thoughts aren't really necessary. I mean, you think about how much time we spend on projecting what could happen in all the different ways it could happen. And a lot of us kind of overkill on that process. Not that we shouldn't plan, don't get me wrong. But some of us go down the rabbit hole and we never get started because we're too busy planning. And others are too worried about, but what if, instead of living life, where the intuitive just experiences what's ever before them. And and it says, hey, if it's not perfect, then they ask the question, what's the lesson? So I got that one next time. But knowing that life isn't going to be perfect and there are going to be some rabbit holes and you are going to go down them, we all do. But if you have an attitude that it's a learning lesson versus a catastrophe and the rest of the world's going to be looking at you, judging you, the ego just kind of lets go in dementia after a point.
It does. That's right. The woman, the lovely lady who lived across the street from me, the very first person who got me involved, she'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's 5 years earlier, and she was, moving right in. But she and I, we'd be on the way, on an errand, out on the road, and she would say, Judy, stop. And she'd make me stop, and she would say, look up. At first she'd been an artist, and so she would tell me, that's cerulean blue, or look at the color that would be robin's egg blue. And she'd be pointing to the sky. She just wanted me to look at this, beautiful sky and clouds. She taught me more about being in the moment and looking at beauty and seeing beauty than anybody I'd ever been with. But as she went through her Alzheimer's, eventually it was me that was saying, telling her, look up. And she just gradually lost vocabulary. Of course, she forgot cerulean, robin's egg. She forgot all those proper nouns first. Then she started forgetting nouns. Pretty soon she didn't know the word for clouds. And then she said, look at the fluffy things. Look at the white things. And then she lost adjectives. And pretty soon she had no ability to express. But we would still stop, before we got in the car, after we got out of the car, before we went into an errand. We just stand there and I, just hold each other's arms and look at the sky. And she was fully able to fully enjoy all that beauty every time, always. So and that's actually the second principle I teach in the book. I want to, I think if we're going to spend time with people who have dementia, we need to become aware that we are both in the present, experiencing the present, and Daniel Kahneman calls that the experiential self. And we are also the part of us, we have that part of us that remembers the past and plans the future. And that'd be the remembering self. But those two selves, if we just become aware that we have two selves, the remembering self and the experiential self, then when a loved one has dementia, we understand that they are fully experiential and in the present, experiencing, even though they can't use that remembering self anymore. And if we can become aware of that, how important it is what we put into their present, I think that just gives us such an understanding of how we can be so much kinder.
Yep, I totally agree with that. And, for you, I'm just thinking, being an attorney, my guess is you were much more a person focused on a rational thought and process. And I could be wrong, and please correct me if
No,
I am.
I'm laughing because I went to law school as an adult. And law school wasn't my first choice for grad school. It was a default choice. But in my earlier life, I studied art, music, languages, literature, all of the things of the intuitive world. And then I end up in law school on very short notice. And the first 6 months or a year was really uncomfortable for me, because for the first time in my life, I was being required to use rational thought almost exclusively. And all of these skills I had used, when I was studying literature and writing and studying languages and art, none of it mattered. In law school, it's facts, law, apply the law to the facts. And very linear. So I think that's what stood out to me. I think that's why I noticed the pattern when I started spending time with people who had dementia. I noticed that they were as distressed by losing the skills of rational thought as I had been distressed by being unable to use the skills of intuitive thought that I preferred.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I think when you come from opposite ends, it just slaps you in the face so much harder too.
True. Yeah.
It just is like, you can't ignore it because you're still trying to think, how does A go to B to C? And
right.
And then you're realizing, okay, they got to that answer a lot faster than I would have. What happened there? And they seem peaceful, because I think a lot of times with rational thought, even though we feel like we've figured out the equation in the back of our mind, it's still, is that the right answer? Or was there an easier way, or, you still have those thoughts.
Yeah. In our culture, in our American culture, we really put a high value on rational thought. And I think we should think about that. And you see it in how we give a lot of respect to lawyers and surgeons and doctors and these professions that use rational thought highly. And yet, why don't we admire the artist or the linguist as much? And really, when you think about it, rational thought and intuitive thought are completely different and completely complementary, and supportive of each other. And we should be looking at the two as equally as valuable. But so that when a person develops dementia, if rational thought is just a tool, something we do equations and computations and make decisions. And, the ones I see the most in my clients are rational thought is the ability to see cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to see steps in a process or sequences. And it's the ability to prioritize ideas or actions. And those three areas of rational thought are the ones that trip up my clients the most. But knowing that, when I understand that my client, when she looks out the window and she sees snow falling, and she's standing inside and she's perfectly warm, if I realize that she is going to refuse to put on a jacket because she cannot see cause and effect, she can't perceive that when she walks outside, snow will cause her to be cold.
Mm-hmm.
So she's going to refuse a jacket. Well, if I understand that's why she's refusing the jacket, then I don't take it personally, and I don't need patience, and I don't need empathy. I just understand that that's how her brain is not working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll take the jacket with me, and when she wants it, then I'll offer it.
Yep.
So to me, just seeing the pattern is so freeing, and I almost feel like this is just like we could all become more aware ourselves of our two types of thought, and be aware ourselves that we every day we're using our experiential self, our remembering selves, and then the other dyad that I talk about is mindfulness and mindlessness. And if we become aware of how we use it, then we aren't going to find it as difficult to just step in and take care of rational thought for our loved one who's got dementia.
Mm-hmm.
Or take care of things that require being mindful, paying attention, following through on something. If we understand that they don't have that, then it's much easier for us just to take care of it for them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you was about the pattern of abilities and cognitive losses, and how you look at them as a psychological changes, basically, versus kind of the disease process. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, but can you go into a little bit more depth in terms of that with our audience?
Yeah. So, and I know I kind of stray into dangerous territory because dementia and Alzheimer's, dementia is not a mental illness, and it's not a mental health issue. But so I don't want to confuse my having used the word psychological with that. But more I use, I want to draw this distinction between when we have disease and there is treatment or cure, that we should look at the issue from a medical point of view and do testing, diagnosis, and then through education, understand what treatment and cure we want to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about dementia, so I want us to just set that aside and carry on looking for a cure and using the medical approach, the biomedical model for research and for medicine. But let's take dementia and look at it from another perspective, because if I'm living with somebody who has dementia,
mm-hmm.
all this diagnosis is of no use at all. What I need to understand, and what will help me, is if I understand their mental and emotional state, and so that's the real meaning of psychological. It's somebody's mental and emotional state, and so if I know they are losing rational thought, they're losing the remembering self,
mm-hmm.
they're losing the ability to be mindful. Knowing that, then I'm going to be able to isolate and see how to respond to them in terms of function.
Mm-hmm.
And function is what we're after. Function is what I need. I need to know what you can do and what you can't do. And then I'll know what I should do to help you and what I should let you do yourself.
Mm-hmm.
and but in this, when we're losing cognition, when we're losing cognitive abilities, it's always very costly emotionally. There's a great deal of distress caused by finding your brain to be giving you inaccurate information about reality, or about what's happening, or about what has happened. And so, as caregivers and families, what we need to be able to do is respond to these lost functions in ways that are supportive emotionally.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. And I think, when you mentioned about, the psychological condition and kind of defining that, to me, with dementia, it's almost that psychosocial condition that, because so much of this is related to still being valued in community, and how people perceive the disease and how their reactions are received by those diagnosed. And I think so many don't even understand that impact. Because, again, sometimes it's not in words, it's in our actions. And we, as a society, are not very in tune to our actions as a whole. So thank you for that. We'd already talked about examples of intuitive versus rational thought, and I just think that is such a good piece for people to really look at. And I loved your example of, okay, she doesn't know she's going to need the coat because to her, snowflakes doesn't mean it's going to be cold. But it was kind of a you get to the point of picking a battle, and there's a saying that you can't win an argument with somebody with dementia. So pick your battles and be prepared and understand that that's just where they're at. And it'll all be okay. There's other ways to work around this situation. And instead of getting into this big battle, just keep moving forward, and trying to create a joyful experience. And that includes not just them, but you and everyone else around you. And we do that by being supportive and understanding and consciously caring with somebody.
Yeah, I teach families, in my Dawn method, I've got 7 tools, and these 7 tools correspond to 2 sets of emotional needs. But my 5th tool is, how do you help someone feel in control? How do you give them enhance their ability to make decisions, or to choose, or to feel like they've already made enough choices today that they can give up, let you make this decision. Mm-hmm. And having a sense of value. How do you help somebody feel and have a sense of value when they're losing vocabulary, they're losing language, and it's impacting their ability to communicate and take part in relationships? Mm-hmm. And so it's these things are really essential emotional needs that are caused by going through cognitive impairment. Mm-hmm. And first we have needs for security. We need to feel secure before we can really feel happy or have a sense of well-being. But there's ways we can do that. When we understand the pattern of loss and the pattern of what's kept, the skills kept, then we can very carefully help our loved ones start to feel more secure.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I can't believe our hour is wrapping up here. I just want to talk about your book, the Dementia Handbook, because you do have just a lot of great little ideas here. And it just kind of goes on and on and on about, little things. So I'm just going to pull a couple of things out. One of them is dementia and mistaken identities. And then you talk about help dad, he thinks I'm mom. He's living in the past. Yeah. He's forgetting, what I look like. Can you talk just a little bit about that mistaken identities and maybe give our audience a couple of tips there?
Yeah. I think when what we need to understand or what we need to realize is that it's when we ask somebody who is losing memory that we really understand what they're losing. So often I'll find that my families will come to visit and then they'll be really hurt because dad or mom mistook them for somebody else or doesn't recognize them at all. And so that's where that little article came from. But I think we need to realize that when you lose your remembering self, you're losing your memories. You know, your what you know of your past, your story, but you also lose the ability to use that skill, the skill of memory itself. And so it's equivalent to if somebody were to be experiencing macular degeneration and they're gradually losing eyesight. Mm-hmm. And so we stop expecting them to see things. You know, you might hold someone's arm and walk across the street with them because you know they're not going to be able to see the curb and they won't be able to see the lines. So we're assisting them because we understand they cannot see right now in this experience they're having present. But we also accept when a person loses eyesight that they won't see us and they won't be able to know it's us unless we explain it to them. And we need to recognize the same thing with memory. And so when dad doesn't recognize you, it's because he doesn't have the skill of using memory, and so he cannot possibly know who you are unless you tell him, mm-hmm. just as a person who's blind can't know who you are unless you tell them. So there's so many I don't know how much time you want me to take, Lori, to really answer this in full, but
you're good.
You know, without memory, without recall, we simply can't expect a person to know who we are. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, when I go to see that dear woman who became my friend and who is now in care, and she has no idea who I am or anybody else. But when I come in, I greet her, and she greets me. You know, she responds with a smile and a hello. Mm-hmm. And her smile and hello are directed at a person who just walked into that room. And then she wonders who I am. And so I will go over to her and say, you know, sometimes I'll say, oh, you know, my hands are so cold. Feel my hands. Feel how cold my hands are. Now, for her, in her experience, the stranger has just walked over and offered her hands. And so she will reach out and touch my hands, and then she'll say, oh, yes, they're very cold. Mm-hmm. But if I were to just walk up to her and grab her hands and say, you know, hi, Mary, because I'm glad to see her, and she's my friend, and I love her, it would be a stranger who is grabbing her hands. And so I don't do that. I give her an opportunity to reach out and touch my hands. And then her compassionate nature, she wants to warm my hands up. And then I can then sit with her and we hold hands. And then I start to tell her all about us. So I will tell her, you know, Mary, I'm your dear friend Judy. And you and me, we've had so much fun together over the years. And boy, I remember, and I will start telling her about our mutual memories. So I'm not asking her to use a skill she doesn't have. Mm-hmm. And I'm not offended or hurt that she isn't using a skill she doesn't have. Mm-hmm. And I'm taking into account that she can't possibly know that I'm somebody whom she has shared many, many, many hugs with. And so I'm going with her set of abilities. And so I will share with her who we are and all the good times we've had together. Mm-hmm. And all the good things we've shared and how much we love each other. And when I do that, you know, tears come to her eyes, tears of joy. She is so overjoyed to have a person there in the present, bringing all of this love and companionship and happy times and happy memories into her present. and that mood lasts for a long time. It lasts for hours,
Mm-hmm.
unless it gets broken by somebody coming into her presence and bringing sorrow, or demanding that she know who they are, or putting her on the spot, embarrassing her, or making her feel badly, making her feel guilty for not remembering
Mm-hmm.
who they are.
Wonderful.
So it's we just need to understand what a person can do, and then accept what they cannot do,
mm-hmm.
and do that for them. So I'm her memory.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I thoroughly enjoy doing, is going over and coming into her presence as a stranger, and then developing that camaraderie, and then mutually enjoying all of the memories that we have, our happy times.
Mm-hmm.
But I bring them because I know she can't.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Well, Judy, this has just been fantastic. I so appreciate all you are doing, for the dementia community. And I want to thank you also for donating some of your books for our dementia cruise and conference that we're doing in November. I know people are really going to enjoy your dementia handbook. So thank you very much for participating in that. As far as contact, what kind of contact information would you like people to have? I know you're on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. If they put in the Dawn Method, typically they'll be able to find you right away.
That's great. Yeah.
And then your website is the Dawn Method, so thedawnmethod.com. And then it looks like email, if they just add Judy at the Dawn Method, they'll be able to get a hold of you without a problem. Yes. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
That does, yeah.
Well, wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Lori. It's been wonderful to talk with you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate all you're doing, and keep up the great work, and I'm sure we'll be in touch in the future.
Sounds great.
Thank you. For those of you that are new to the Alive and Social Network, you might want to check out one of my sidekicks here, Rachel Perrin, who's the culinary director for Kowalski's Market. She has an episode that she does that's only 10 or 15 minutes, and it's called What's for Dinner Tonight? And it's a great way to figure out what the heck you're going to eat. Or maybe, we've got Easter coming up around the corner. Maybe you're still trying to figure out menus, and they have a great, delicious seasonal menu list on their website at KOWALSKIS.com. That's Kowalskis.com. Go ahead and check that out. Again, I'm going to give another plug for our dementia-friendly conference and cruise, November 11th through the 18th. It'll be going to the Caribbean through Holland, America. You do have to go through our travel agent, Kathy Schoaf, to be part of that conference. But you'll be able to hear not only from myself and Cindy Luzinski, who heads up the Colorado grassroots effort for a dementia-friendly community, but Harry Urban, Michael Ellenbogen, Lori Shearer, and Mary Reed, all living with dementia. And now Becky Watson is joining us, who is a music therapist. In addition, all of our shows here on Alzheimer's Speaks Radio are archived, and we have years of them. So feel free to go back and listen to some of our past shows. We just did one on chair yoga, which was great. Another one was on Shay's Way, which is another approach to dementia. And then we had somebody talking about the wonders in dementia land. And that was just real fun. She's in the process of writing a play about her experience with her mom, and she's just a real go-getter. We also had one not too long ago about children in dementia. This isn't an old person's disease. This can hit any of us, and so we have to be aware of that. I also want to let you know about Dementia Chats. Our last one, we talked about how they want to be communicated with. And again, our experts on Dementia Chats all are living with the disease, and so who better to learn from. They also talk about how their senses have changed and just give you great insights in terms of dealing with the disease as it progresses. A couple of upcoming film screenings of His Neighbor Phil on May 20th. I will be at St. Trace in Woodbury, and on May 23rd, I'm going to be in Ellsworth, Wisconsin, so you can look for those. Feel free to check out our blogs. We always have different articles there. There was an ode to a caregiver that got a lot of traction Also, 20% off the new edition of the 36-Hour Day by Johns Hopkins Press, and some information on some trials there. If you have somebody you're worried about wandering, you may want to check the Caregiver Alert Center. And you can just go to the callalertcenter.com/caregiver. And if you put in the promo code ALZSpeaks, promo 10, you'll get 10% off if you sign up. But it's a great mode to just feel a little safer, not only for you as a care partner, but for the person diagnosed. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and we will talk with you soon. Bye now.
Hi, this is Suzanne Newman, host of the Answers for Elders podcast and radio show. We are the North Star that guides you through the complicated journey of senior care with trusted experts in money, law, living solutions, and more. So join us on this station, your favorite podcast channel, or just go to AnswersForElders.com. Meet the wayshowers who will help your journey go a lot easier.